6.4 million years ago, the Earth was not a place of comfort, it was a test of survival. There were no cities, no roads, no language, no gods, and no humans. Not yet, only something in between. Creatures caught in the slow fire of evolution. They weren't beasts anymore, but they weren't fully human either, not yet. What roamed the lands of Eastern Africa were our distant ancestors, primitive hominins. They stood on two legs, awkward and wobbly. Their faces were flat, their brows heavy, their brains barely a third the size of ours. Covered in hair, they moved like shadows, quiet, uncertain, vulnerable. They had no fire, no homes, no clothes, just instinct, fear, and hunger. And in this world, hunger was everything. Every morning began not with comfort, but with urgency. Before the sun rose, they were already moving, eyes scanning, feet crunching over dirt and leaves, stomachs gnawing from the night before. They didn't farm, they didn't store food. Each day they started again, like it was their first. They dug through the dirt for roots and bugs, climbed trees in search of fruit, and when nothing was found, they followed vultures. Because where vultures flew, something had died, and where something had died, they had a chance. These beings were not hunters yet. They were scavengers, too slow to chase, too weak to fight, but clever enough to follow. They would approach the remains of a lion's kill, shaking, listening, the smell of blood still fresh. And with trembling hands, they'd pick up stones not to kill, but to crack. They smashed bones open and sucked out the marrow inside. It wasn't delicious, it wasn't safe, but it was survival. When rains came, they had nowhere to hide. No homes, no roofs, no walls. They curled under trees, under cliffs, or in shallow caves. Soaked to the skin, they trembled through the storms. And when the thunder grew too loud, they didn't scream. They didn't cry. They froze, silent, because loud sounds attracted predators. When the nights came, they gathered close, not for warmth, but for safety. The dark was full of eyes. Leopards stalked the shadows. Hyenas followed the wind. Snakes slithered unseen in the grass. A single scream from a child could bring death to all of them. So they lived quietly, even in fear. Their feet were bare. Their hands were calloused. Every thorn, every bite, every broken branch left scars. But they moved forward. Each day was a gamble. Each night was a risk. And yet, they didn't give up. Because something inside them, something deeper than fear, told them to keep going. To endure, and slowly, painfully. They began to change. One day, a female climbed a tree for honey. Bees swarmed, stinging her face, her arms, her eyes. She screamed, fell, and landed hard. But the next day, she climbed again. Only this time, she used smoke from a burning log. The bees scattered. She grabbed the honey and brought it back. The others watched, and they learned. This was knowledge, not just survival. Shared survival. They had no words, no books, no schools, but they had eyes and memory. And from one risk came a tradition. Elsewhere, a young male crouched near a stream. He saw fish, fast, slippery. He reached in, missed, again and again, until he found a stick with a pointed end. He lunged, caught one. He took it back, proudly. The others chewed it raw, tough, cold, but better than nothing. Next time they all brought sticks, sharpened them with stones, and fish became part of their diet. It wasn't just luck anymore. It was planning. And in the distance, a storm rolled in. Lightning struck the grass. A fire broke out. They watched from afar as flames consumed everything. Smoke choked the air. Animals fled, but the fire did not last forever. It burned out, and after the ash settled, the group approached. Cautiously there, in the blackened soil, lay the body of an antelope, cooked by the fire. Its meat warm, soft, different. They tasted it, and something lit up inside them. They didn't know why it was better, but they knew. It was later. They would carry coals in shells, burn bark to make smoke. Not to destroy, but to preserve, to protect, to create fire, took centuries. But the desire to keep it alive started here. Soon after came tools, simple ones. A sharp rock to cut, a long stick to reach, nothing elegant, but effective. One cracked nuts with a stone, another scraped meat from bone, a third used a stick to dig for water, and they watched each other, mimicked, improved, passed it on. This wasn't instinct, it was early technology. Their brains, once small, were growing, faster than their bodies, faster than the world around them. They began working in groups, not just for warmth, but for function. One would scout, another would dig, a third would guard the young. They weren't just surviving, they were cooperating. A predator attacked. They fought together, one was injured. They waited, no words, just sounds, signals, trust. And it worked. The ones who worked together lived longer. They chose better paths, safer grounds, higher caves. Their movement wasn't random. It had memory behind it. The dry river that failed them last season, they avoided it now. The tree that bore fruit after the rains, they returned to it. This was not just learning. It was mapping the world, and with fire, food, and family came something deeper. Time. For the first time in history, a hominin sat down, not to eat, not to sleep, but to look out at the stars, at a child at the flickering flame, and they wondered. They didn't have names, but they had emotion. They didn't have gods, but they had grief. When one died, they paused, they stayed, they felt, and something sacred began. Burial, ritual, the beginnings of humanity. It didn't come all at once. It came through millions of tiny decisions. To share food, to wait for the weak, to teach the young to protect something other than yourself. That was the moment the first humans were born. Not when they stood up, not when they made tools, not when they used fire, but when they chose to care. Because in a world that offered them nothing, they made everything. Shelter, fire, food, tools, community, memory. 6.4 million years ago, humans were not yet human, but inside the suffering, the storms, the starvation, was a spark. And that spark became a fire that still burns today. In every story, every discovery, every act of kindness, born not from power, but from pain. Not from luxury, but from loss. We are not here because the world was kind. We are here because someone refused to give up, and that is the true beginning of mankind.